Hey, welcome back, everyone. Happy New Year. Good to see you all here. As you can see, I still have my tree. Yes, I'm getting rid of it soon, but I like it too much. Folks, some interesting stuff to go into today. We're seeing a repeat of what happened right now at the beginning of the pandemic. You might remember when, of course, the Chinese Communist Party was saying that there was no human-to-human transmission. The virus, COVID-19, was spreading almost entirely in China. You may remember the Chinese Communist Party locked down travel internally in China, but allowed travel outside of China. That meant anybody looking to escape the lockdowns left the country. And they did it right ahead of the Chinese New Year, really the time when, well, it's the biggest travel season of China. And keep in mind that Wuhan is kind of like the main travel hub of all of China, meaning the CCP used that to seed the virus to every corner of the world. While the Chinese Communist Party was destabilized, they took an initiative essentially to make sure the entire world was destabilized along with them. Then, of course, they recommended bad policy, lockdowns, mask mandates, now even vaccine mandates. Those are all the CCP model. And then encourage other countries to do it using the mouthpiece of the World Health Organization, which, of course, could not demonstrate its independence from the CCP. Well, folks, they're doing it again. The Chinese Communist Party right now has millions of new infections all across the country. At the current rate, you can expect most of the country to be infected probably by the end of the month. And they've now opened travel outside of China. Interesting timing on making that decision, if you ask me. And given that situation, there are some flights, for example, going to other countries. They're saying about half the people on those flights coming from China are testing positive for COVID-19. The CCP right now, as we speak, is again seeding the virus to every corner of the world. Some new updates on that we'll be going into today, so stick around for that. Also, some interesting stuff with Ukraine and Russia. They've now signed a new agreement reaffirming their pact. You might remember the Chinese Communist Party and Russia signed a no-limits agreement right when Russia was launching the war in Ukraine. And given that situation, the CCP is now also getting more aggressive towards the United States. Take these things in connection with each other. We're going to be going pretty in-depth on this today. Also, after the jump, because, sorry for the background noise if you can hear it. After the jump, something pretty big just happened as well, which if you watch my documentary, The Real Story of January 6th, you might know. Folks, it turns out on Jan 6, the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi in particular, took efforts not only to make sure that the National Guard was not deployed, but actually reduced security at the Capitol, at the Capitol building. One sec. They reduced security at the Capitol building right ahead of January 6, when all the evidence, all the information was showing there's going to be large-scale protests. Now, I can only talk about that after the cut, given how YouTube is with us. They've given us retroactive strikes recently. If I get 2 more, they just delete our channel. So come join us on Epic TV. We don't have to worry about that nonsense. And again, I do an hour-and-a-half show. Usually I do about 25-ish minutes on YouTube. We're also on Rumble, Facebook, Twitter. Again, Epic TV, we do the full broadcast. Come join us there, folks. Always a great discussion. Always a pleasure having you here. That's how let's get started. All right, first story today. Let's get into what's happening with China opening up the pressure valve, essentially, to seed the virus to every corner of the world. Yet again, a repeat of what we saw last time. Let me show you here first. This is Breitbart, and Breitbart is saying this. Chinese tourists flock to the borders, potentially spreading coronavirus outbreak worldwide. I should note, this has been happening a little bit already. You might remember Michael Yan, war correspondent. I did the documentary with him, which was looking into the border crisis. It was called Border Deception. Michael Yan's been sending some updates in the Darien Gap and, of course, Panama, really the southern border of Panama. And he's been running into a lot of Chinese nationals there. What they're essentially saying, based on reports I've seen, they're saying they're trying to escape zero COVID, Xi Jinping's lockdowns. Well, they no longer have to escape the way they once were, funny enough, unless they're actually infected with the virus, because now Xi Jinping has opened up travel. Let me show you. Breitbart says Travel bookings surged in China on Tuesday after the National Immigration Administration announced passport applications will once again be processed as of January 8th, 2023. The policy change ends years-old travel restrictions just as the biggest coronavirus wave of the entire pandemic sweeps across China. Worst one yet. Several other countries, such as Japan and India, announced their own restrictions on Chinese travelers in response. Some Chinese provinces are now reporting millions of coronavirus infections in a single day. Further in its states, China announced the end of mandatory quarantine for inbound travelers on Monday, and on Tuesday it began ramping up its passport machinery for the big Lunar New Year travel season, the biggest travel season in China, as reported by the state-run Xinhua news service. Now, what does that mean for us here in the United States? Well, it could mean, frankly, a new pandemic, essentially. There's different takes on what's actually happening in China. Some reports are saying that the infections they have there are just Omicron. We've already seen it in the U.S. Omicron in the United States, the Omicron variant of COVID-19, was seen in the United States to have higher infection rates but lower death rates. It's a less lethal version of the virus. And given the fact that we've already seen it in the United States and it was less trouble than earlier strains of the virus, this shouldn't infect us if that's the case. That being said, I have been seeing some reports that what they have in China is a new strain, a new variant. And, you do have folks like even Fauci warning that, it could lead to new mutations. He's not entirely wrong, although I disagree with him on many points. We'll see what happens with this. It's really not clear whether basically we're dealing with normal COVID-19 or something else entirely. I know Dr. Li Mengyan, one of the virus whistleblowers from one of the Chinese laboratories who defected to the United States. I know her and her research team are saying some interesting stuff, suggesting that not only is it a new variant, but the CCP appeared to be ready for it in some regards. There's some mixed reporting on that because CCP members' top leadership are dying right now. There are members of the CCP who are dying right now, like high-level members. And so, prepare as they might have, it wasn't enough. But it's going to be pretty interesting as this thing spreads. We don't know. In other words, we don't actually know what we're getting ourselves into. As we do go into this, though, I'd say one thing is certain. The mask mandates, the lockdowns, those types of policies have not worked. The CCP went further than any other country in the world. It did not work there, and it's not going to work anywhere else. That being said, you're going to expect to hear a lot more chatter calling for those types of policies, probably in the U.S. You're probably going to watch new calls for, maybe mask mandates at the very least. And of course, you're probably going to watch new calls for the updated vaccines, which are the new Omicron variant vaccines that Fauci's very proud about. You're going to watch a lot of this. Get ready for the new wave of narratives as the new wave of virus infections begin to hit the United States and other countries. And let me show you what's happening right now briefly, and we'll go a bit more into this. The Hill says this. It says nearly half of passengers from China... Sorry. I'm working from home today again because I'm still coughing a bit. The Hill says nearly half of passengers from China to Milan have COVID, according to Italian officials. And they're stating this. Nearly half of the passengers on 2 recent flights from China to Milan tested positive for COVID-19, Italian health officials said on Wednesday. About 38% of passengers on one flight into Milan's Malpensa Airport tested positive for COVID-19, as did about 52% of those on the second flight, according to local officials in Italy's Lombardy region. Italy will begin testing all new arrivals from China and sequencing the tests for new variants amid China's surge in COVID-19 cases, Italy's health minister said on Wednesday. Now, I'll get into this in a minute, but the Biden administration is following suit. Many countries are putting some travel restrictions on China. All they're doing right now is basically testing people. If they test positive, they maybe have to quarantine or whatever else. but they are making mandatory testing a thing for people coming from China to other countries. Now, is that going to be enough to actually do anything? Probably not, because the CCP has already done quite a lot to already send people abroad, regardless of that. Not to mention the fact that, frankly, the test kits, these COVID-19 test kits were shown to be essentially giving a lot of false positives. They're not reliable. Many of them, ironically, come from China in the first place. The whole thing is a big mess. And also, given that, remember, the virus has different stages where it can remain basically dormant. The problem we have, again, is the possibility of new variants. That's going to be the big discussion. Is this, again, Omicron, or is it something entirely different? Why is it killing people in China at the rate reports say it is, which, frankly, I believe are accurate at this point? We don't know. At the same time, too, the Chinese Communist Party has not been transparent with its data, which is very odd, again, because the CCP has been praised so much by a lot of foreign leadership, including by, like, the Faucis of the world, up until very recently. Basically, the CCP has not been forthcoming with data on its own, pretty much what's happening domestically. All right, folks, before I go deeper into this, because there's a lot more to talk about, we do have a sponsor today. Today's episode is brought to you by Secure. Over 155 million Americans are affected by data leaks in 2020. The average American had their personal data stolen about 4 times over the year. People get anxious because they can't protect their online data or their online activity. But now there's a new email and messenger app called Secure. Think of privacy and security for sending emails and messages. Now, folks, that's SEKUR. Secure's server and data center are hosted in Switzerland, which has the strictest data privacy laws in the world. It's also not reliant on big tech companies like Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, which also means it's not subject to the Intrusive Cloud Act. Secure does not ask for your phone number, it does not mine your data or upload your contacts. Those of you interested, it's $5 for the messenger, $7 for the email, or $10 for the email and messenger package. You can visit secure.com today for a free 7-day trial, or you can use the promo code Joshua to get 25% off. And folks, big thanks out to Secure for sponsoring today's episode. Now, deeper into this. The CDC, in the United States, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, they are announcing similar policies on China right now, where they're going to make mandatory testing a thing. This is not a travel embargo. This does not restrict people traveling from China to the United States. It does not do that. But it says this. CDC is announcing today, this is the actual CDC website, CDC is announcing today that it will implement a requirement for a negative COVID-19 test or documentation of recovery for air passengers boarding flights to the United States originating from the People's Republic of China and the special administrative regions of Hong Kong and Macau. Now, folks, if they're going to be requiring a negative COVID-19 test or documentation of recovery from China, it's going to be a big sham because people can falsify those documents in any way they want. This is a show lockdown. This is fake. This is in no way going to stop people from falsifying documents. And you can expect fraud to go, pretty much like you've never seen it before. This is in no way going to do anything to stop it. If they're going to be relying on people from China showing documentation from China, that they're clear, especially because the CCP right now would have it in its own interest to get people out of the country, to seed the virus, and to make sure they don't look like the laughing stock of the world, essentially, that their own policies failed to deal with this. Remember that what's on the line for the Chinese Communist Party right now is the humility of the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party would look humiliated if after making such a big show to the world, look at what we can do, look at our lockdowns, look at our vaccine passports, look at all the totalitarian policies we have, look at all the things we can do that you cannot do in your free, democratic, quote-unquote, societies. They can point to all that and say, hey, what we do is better, we have more control. For them, COVID-19 represents not just a pandemic. For them, COVID-19 represents not just a virus, but also a battle of systems. It is them trying to validate that the Chinese Communist Party's model of governance works better than free societies. That's what this represents to them. Now, given the fact that the CCP's own interests are on the line, and they open up foreign travel right amidst this massive outbreak, which again, they had it locked down for a long time. Why, right during this massive outbreak, do they then decide to open it up? It's because they don't want to look like the laughing stock of the world. They don't want to look like their own policies failed. They want to make this look like a global failure or a global outbreak, and they can redo what they did before and say, hey, look what we can do, zero COVID yet again, of course, manipulate the numbers. Meaning, it is in their interest, the CCP has it in its interest to allow people to leave the country. The CCP changed its policies amid this outbreak. Now, given that, do you think the CCP is going to say, oh, sorry, mister, looks like you tested positive for COVID-19. I'm not going to sign this document. You can't travel. No. There's a reason why they opened up the travel. There's a reason why they open things up right now. It's because they don't want to look bad. They don't want to look like the laughing stocks. This policy is going to do nothing, in other words. But regardless, it says this. CDC is announcing this step to slow the spread of COVID-19 in the United States during the surge in COVID-19 cases in the PRC, People's Republic of China. Given the lack of adequate and transparent epidemiological and virus genomic sequence data reported from the CDC, from the PRC, People's Republic of China. In other words, the CCP has been very closed when it comes to actually providing information on what they're facing to the rest of the world. Again, suggesting for the CCP this is a cover-up. Suggesting for the CCP this is not about stopping the spread of the virus. Suggesting that for the Chinese Communist Party, this is about making themselves look good, saving face, regardless of the cost to other countries. That's what's happening. It states this, CDC continues just a bit more. Variants of the SARS-CoV-2, again, this is a SARS variant virus, COVID-19, of the SARS-CoV-2 virus continue to emerge in countries around the world. However, reducing testing and case reporting in the PRC and minimal sharing of viral genomic sequence data could delay the identification of new variants of concern if they arise. Pre-departure testing and the requirement to show a negative test result have been shown to decrease the number of infected passengers boarding airplanes. Yeah, shown to be effective in other countries. If you're asking one of these Chinese nationals who are leaving at the behest of the CCP to get the signature from the CCP to say they can travel, it's not going to work. Not even if the CCP had in its interest of not allowing that to some extent, people are going to falsify the data. It means nothing. This is in no way a restriction on travel from China to the United States. This is a big show. It will do nothing. And again, this is from the same folks who've been telling us this whole time, wear your masks, get your vaccine. It's a danger to society and whatever, while they throw the southern border wide open. It's a big show. If they cared about, stopping a pandemic, they wouldn't allow 5 million people to enter the U.S. over the course of a pandemic. They wouldn't do that. They wouldn't allow 5 million people to illegally enter the United States during a pandemic, people we can't track or anything else, if they were trying to do something about it. Now, given that situation, do you think the CCP cares about that? No. The CCP seeded the virus. This whole thing, from top to bottom, in terms of how it's being handled, is a giant show. The entire thing, they're doing everything that you would do if you were trying to spread the virus rather than stop it. Yes, they have vaccine mandates and so on. The vaccine mandates have been shown to be essentially ineffective for the most part. The masks are worthless. CDC admitted this fact. Fauci said it previously. He's now changing his narrative because who knows why. Maybe it's in his interest for some other reason. It's a giant show, folks. Regardless of that, I think people are getting infected. I do think there are serious cases of this. And I do think what's happening in China right now is actually a public health threat. I think what's happening in China is real and very serious. And what they're doing to stop it will not stop it. Just being real with y'all. Now, that being said, now that the Biden administration is putting some travel restrictions on China, does anybody remember the last time this happened? Back in like 2019, when, remember, the virus is spreading all through China. And of course, they were allowing travel. They started allowing travel outside of China. The CCP was being accused of seeding the virus. It's the same dang thing happening. But do you remember what happened? Trump was called a racist. They called Trump a racist for restricting travel from China to the United States. Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats were going to Chinatown and partying, trying to make, virtue signal, essentially virtue signaling, saying, hey, look at how not racist we are. Go hug a Chinese person. They had narratives like that. Remember that? Some of my Chinese friends were like cringing over this. I have a lot of Chinese colleagues. They were like cringing over this. Regardless, people are pointing out the hypocrisy now of the Biden administration, because the same situation is taking place right now. They're not taking things as far as Trump did. They're actually putting real travel restrictions in place, but it's similar. And Just the News had this story. It says COVID boomerang. Biden criticized for restricting travel after dubbing Trump xenophobic. Remember, Biden tweeted to Trump, do your job, where he was calling Trump a racist and said, do your job, suggesting that, essentially the travel bans from China were unnecessary. Remember that? It says this: when Donald Trump took action to regulate travel from Asian nations at the start of the pandemic in 2020, then candidate Joe Biden spared few words. He accused the Republican president of, quote, xenophobic fear-mongering, in a line the left would embrace for weeks, while one of his top aides declared travel restrictions would not help stop the spread of the virus. If travel restrictions don't help stop the spread of the virus, why are they doing it this time, right? Now President Biden himself, nearly 3 years later, Biden finds himself on the receiving end of similar criticism. Basically, it's Republicans accusing him of hypocrisy. In my opinion, again, it does show that a lot of the narratives back in 2020 were just that. They were narratives. They were made to, basically win brownie points for the elections. They in no way represented real positions, real medical advice, or reality in general. They were fake. It was just politicians playing politics to make their enemies look bad, to try to win votes, essentially. Doing so at a time when, frankly, they should have locked things down even harder than they did. I would actually blame some of the criticism Trump received at that time for the fact that Trump did not go further with the lockdowns and maybe stop the spread of COVID-19 into the United States a little more effectively than we did. In fact, of course, the 2 weeks to slow the spread, the lockdowns, and so on, it would have been a whole lot more effective if we didn't import the virus from China. It would have been a whole lot more effective had we had decent border security. It would have been a whole lot more effective if we didn't implement all these other woke policies that did the exact opposite of what they claimed they were trying to do. While they lied to us, locked us down, told us to wear masks, meanwhile they were partying at their own, private gatherings and so on without masks, like Obama's birthday party, you might remember, where only the servants had to wear masks, right? All the people partying otherwise did not. It's a big show, right? That being said, with all this, folks, I do think we can expect new calls for lockdowns. I'll be honest with y'all on my own personal opinion on this. Frankly, I think there are people who want to keep this going forever. There are people who don't care on infections. There are people who don't care about deaths. They have other agendas with this. It's a political agenda. I'm not saying all of them are like this, but I do say some of them are in fact like this. They view the lockdowns as being necessary for, the ability to roll out future policies to build back better, to reset the global economy, and to do other things they want to do. They view COVID-19 as a vehicle for this. It's why, in my opinion, when they tell us that we're in the endemic, the pandemic is over, we're in the endemic, that the virus is here to stay, of course, they make those declarations, they start rolling things back on the mask mandates and, vaccine mandates, but they keep the emergency declaration in place. They don't want to let go of that ring. They don't want to toss it into the fire, essentially. They want to keep it. Why do they want to keep it if they're telling us it's over? Well, it's because they have other agendas with it, in my opinion. And just showing some of this as well, folks, there are some people driving this who never want this to end, ever. Let me show you. New Yorker had an interesting story, and it said this: the case for wearing masks forever. This is the New Yorker. It says this. I won't go over the whole thing, but basically it talks about how the Biden administration started ending some of the lockdown policies, ended the mask mandates, kind of rolled things back on the vaccine mandates. There's some changes to that. But then it says this. Mindy Thompson Fulilove, a professor of urban policy and health at the new school, was livid, very angry when the lockdowns and stuff ended. It says Fulilove, who is black, I don't know why that's necessary, but they say that, has spent her career studying epidemics, first AIDS, then crack, then multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. I'm sure studying crack would help you understand COVID-19, right? She has seen how disease can ravage cities, especially in black and working class communities. They're making this a race thing for some reason. Regardless, it says this: from the beginning, Fulilove was skeptical of how the federal government handled the coronavirus pandemic. But these new recommendations from the CDC, ending the mask mandates and so on, she said, were, quote, flying in the face of science. Further in it states, what emerged was the People's CDC, not the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, folks, but the People's Center for Disease Control and Prevention. They say it's a ragtag coalition of academics, doctors, activists, and artists who believe that the government has left them to fend for themselves against COVID-19. As government, schools, and businesses have scaled back their COVID precautions, the members of the People's CDC have made it their mission to distribute information about the pandemic, what they see as real information, as opposed to what's circulated by the actual CDC. Now, I would argue that if the CDC has actual recommendations and people go against that, isn't that what people have been banned for on Twitter? Isn't that what got... I personally got a retroactive strike on YouTube exactly for this just a few weeks ago, for spreading COVID misinformation. I'm not even joking. I had to be careful even talking about this because of, frankly, we're still on YouTube. People have been getting strikes on YouTube for exactly this. People have been getting punished by YouTube for exactly this. And now you have folks, going against CDC recommendations on the opposite side. Are they going to be deplatformed, censored, or whatever else if they're not going by the quote-unquote science? Well, folks, that's a whole other discussion, something we're going to be going more into, I think, probably tomorrow. But basically, the whole discussion around what is science, really the whole thing's about to change. Tomorrow, I'll go more deep into that. But today, I want to go deeper into some of what's happening with the Chinese Communist Party, with Ukraine, with the potential of the war expanding, and given that in context of the the CCP, are they really so different? Now seeding the virus to every corner of the world yet again, and frankly, the policies put in place to stop it from doing that, in my opinion, not coming close to being enough to actually do anything. Meaning the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is right now seeding the virus. The Chinese Communist Party is exporting the virus. Given that it's their policy right now, I doubt they're going to play along with the whole, sign your name here that you're not infected thing, and actually make sure people who have it are not being sent to other countries. It's a big show. I don't think it's going to do anything. And we're probably going to see a new global spread of it, possibly a new variant. Get ready for it, folks. Get ready for the new narratives with this. This is now happening. That said, a lot to go into still. We will jump over exclusively to Epic TV for the rest of this. Again, I do an hour-and-a-half show. It's only about half an hour in, so still a lot to talk about. Also, we do the live Q&A over at Epic TV, so come join us. There's a great community of folks there, great discussions. Those of you on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, Twitter, come join us on Epic TV. Also, you help the show keep going because we're just demonetized just about everywhere. That said, folks, let's jump over now. Before we jump over, I will show you a trailer. The documentary I did, The Final War, we've now cut it into 6 different chapters so you can watch it in parts. The first one, of course, goes into some of what's happening that I think very relevant right now. Be sure to check it out. It's bite-sized chunks. Let me show you a trailer of that, then we'll jump over.
The greatest threat facing the United States is the CCP.
The Epoch Times investigation team had studied the CCP for years, but what we uncovered was yielding evidence beyond our imagination.
With Chairman Mao, with the Prime Minister, our talks have been characterized by frankness.
The Clinton administration said, oh, don't worry about it. This will be a poison pill for China.
China's strategic goal is to make sure that the U.S. has 4 enemies, and one of them must be a terrorist group.
We are giving of our life's blood so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive and thrive.
Again, folks, that's now in 6 chapters. You can watch them individually as episodes. You can watch on Epic TV. Becoming ever more relevant, especially given this next story we're going to be talking about. That said, though, let's jump over exclusively to Epic TV, and I will see you there. Folks, thank you for being here.